The observation drone, designation Scrutiny 7, hung like a mote of dust against the stained ceiling, its multispectral optics locked onto the human habitat below. Inside, human subject Echo moved through her small, almost absurdly green living space. It was less an apartment, more a cultivated jungle. Every surface, every sunbeam, was claimed by some form of terrestrial flora. Sprawling vines, stiff, upright stalks, delicate ferns unfurling like alien lace. The air, even filtered through the drone's advanced systems, was thick with it, a heady, complex perfume. The xenobotanists on the Arbiter had dubbed it the scent of the Roman peristyle, a reference to archaic Terran gardens, though the exact reason for the humans' obsession with these chlorophyll-processing organisms remained deeply puzzling. Subject Echo approached a towering specimen, a veritable arboreal behemoth with broad, dark leaves that nearly brushed the ceiling. She paused, running her fingers along a velvety leaf, a gesture of almost parental tenderness. "Good morning, Jupiter," she murmured, her voice a low, soothing hum. "You've really stretched out this cycle, haven't you? Must be all that new nutrient mix." The drone logged a peak in Subject Echo's emotional indicators. Oxytocin release, elevated heart rate, subtle facial muscle contractions consistent with contentment. 4.22 a simple photosynthetic biomass, utterly incapable of reciprocating. The lead xenolinguist, Xylar, whose own species communicated through complex bioluminescent patterns, found the humans' vocalizations towards inert vegetation baffling. "They speak to them," Xylar projected to the Arbiter-S bridge, as if expecting a response. "Our current hypothesis indicates a primitive form of anthropomorphism, possibly a coping mechanism for isolated existence." But the primitive anthropomorphism theory began to unravel. Days bled into cycles, cycles into weeks. The drone meticulously recorded Subject Echo's rituals, daily waterings, precise adjustments to light exposure, even gentle dusting of leaves with a soft cloth. She named them all. There was Athena, a cascading plant with delicate white flowers, and Pluto, a spiky, resilient cactus in a corner. Each received personalized attention, specific vocalizations, and varying levels of physical interaction. The most confounding observation was the human's consistent emotional investment. A new shoot on Jupiter elicited a bright, genuine smile. A browning leaf on Athena brought a sharp intake of breath, a frown of concern. Then came the observation that shattered the Arbiter Dawn, carefully constructed understanding of human emotional architecture. Pluto, the spiky cactus, began to wither. Slowly, inexorably. Its vibrant green faded to a sickly yellow, its robust form softening, collapsing inwards. Subject Echo watched this decline with an increasing, palpable anguish. Her usual morning routine became punctuated by long, silent stares at the dying plant. One rotation, the drone recorded her kneeling beside Pluto, her shoulders trembling. She carefully cupped the shriveled form in her hands, her head bowed. "Oh, Pluto," she whispered, her voice raw, choked with unshed tears. "I tried. I really did. I'm so sorry, little guy." And then, a single, glistening tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, landing softly on the desiccated stem. Xylar's vocalizer stuttered. "It is grieving," he announced, his projections laced with utter bewilderment. "For a collection of photosynthetic cells that cannot even acknowledge its own existence, let alone its demise." The bridge of the Arbiter fell silent, save for the low thrum of the warp core. It wasn't anthropomorphism. It was deeper. It was a profound, unshakable capacity for connection that extended far beyond sentient life. Humans didn't just live in their environment. They loved it, fiercely, and without reservation. The Arbiter crew hadn't slept since the Pluto incident. The holographic projections on the bridge flickered, displaying an endless loop of human Subject Echo's tear-streaked face. Xylar, the xenolinguist, now projected with a new urgency. Their capacity for emotional bonding, it's not limited to sentient life, not even to asterisk mobile life. They grieve for photosynthetic organisms. They bond with them. The implications had sent a ripple of disquiet through the entire observation fleet. If humans could forge such profound, visceral connections with inert plant matter, what were the boundaries of their attachment? A new directive was issued: find the limits. The drone network, enhanced and repositioned, now focused its omnispectral lenses on Habitat 7, specifically on what the humans called an atrium, a vast, climate-controlled biodome bursting with alien flora, maintained with an almost religious zeal. The echoes in a sacred atrium designation felt fitting. Human subject Kale, a burly individual with thick, calloused hands, moved through the humid air. The scent here was overwhelming, a living, breathing tapestry of sweet, earthy, and pungent notes. Kale wasn't just observing, he was tending. He paused beside a towering fern, its fronds unfurling in delicate spirals. "All right, old friend," Kale rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle for his imposing frame. "Let's see if we can get you a bit more sun on this side." He carefully, almost reverently, adjusted a light panel above it, his brow furrowed in concentration. The drone logged the familiar spikes in oxytocin, the subtle facial expressions mirroring subject echoes. The xenobotanists still struggled to comprehend the depth of this dedication. Suddenly, a high-pitched whir cut through the peaceful hum of the atrium. A maintenance drone, an automated cleaning unit, malfunctioned. It spun wildly, veering off its programmed path, its blunt, metallic arm swinging precariously close to a delicate cluster of glowing, bioluminescent fungi. These fungi, dubbed star weavers by the humans, were particularly fragile, their light-emitting caps easily bruised. Kale's head snapped up. His eyes, previously soft with quiet focus, sharpened, narrowing on the rogue drone. "Hey! Watch it!" he barked, his voice suddenly hard, laced with an unmistakable warning. He didn't hesitate. He launched forward, a surprising burst of speed for someone of his build. The maintenance drone spun, its arm arcing towards the fungi. Kale didn't try to deactivate it or divert it with a tool. He simply interposed himself. His thick forearm slammed against the drone's chassis, sending a jarring reverberation through the atrium. The drone ricocheted, sparking, its arm harmlessly deflected. Kale stood breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his body angled protectively in front of the delicate star weavers. "Stupid piece of junk," he muttered, his hand gently brushing a glowing cap, checking for damage. The Arbiter Taunt S bridge went silent again. Xylar projected, his bioluminescent patterns flashing with frantic analysis. He shielded it. With his own body, he put himself in harm's way for a collection of fungi. The logical circuits of the Arbiter S crew whirred, struggling to process. It wasn't just bonding, it wasn't just grief, it was protections. A primal, instinctual defense mechanism for something they considered their own. Something they had nurtured, named, and apparently loved. The implications struck the command crew like a physical blow. If humans could develop such fierce, unyielding protective instincts for a glowing fungal colony, for a potted plant, for anything they connected with, then what depths of ferocity would they unleash if something they truly valued, their homes, their families, their very species, were threatened? The notion that these soft-skinned, emotionally volatile creatures could bond with anything was no longer an interesting hypothesis. The alien observer, Probe Gata Gamma, drifted through the cold void of Sector 9, its instruments now finely tuned not just to detect biometrics, but the subtle nuances of human emotional output. The mission parameter was clear: confirm and quantify the human capacity for bonding with non-sentient life. After the Pluto incident and the Star Weaver protection, the Tundil Arbiter Command was convinced humans bonded with anything. Now they wanted to understand the depth and utility of it. Human subject Theta was their focus. Theta was stationed in a remote, almost desolate orbital station, a maintenance hub far from any bustling human colony. Her living quarters were Spartan, metallic, stark, but in one corner, defying the sterile austerity, a small, vibrant patch of green thrived. Not the lush, ornamental plants of Earth, but hardy, stubborn flora, genetically modified for resilience. One particularly caught Mensa probe Gamma's attention. A squat, dark-leafed specimen with tiny, almost insignificant flowers, emitting a pungent, acrid aroma. The arbiter cornsuckle's xenobotanists had identified it as Solanum amara, bitter nightshade. Potentially toxic, unappealing. Yet Theta tended it with a strange, quiet reverence. Theta knelt before her, garden. The faint hum of life support systems, the only other sound in the small module. Her fingers, stained with earth, carefully plucked a withered leaf from the nightshade. "Still fighting, old friend," she murmured, her voice a low rumble. "Good." She didn't stroke it, didn't coo, but her gaze was steady, her touch sure. Nan's probe-gamma registered a distinct pattern of focused contentment, a sense of purpose, not overwhelming joy, but a deep, quiet satisfaction. This, bitter nightshade, had no name, no overt affection, yet the bond was undeniably present. The xenolinguists on *arbiter struggled. There is no direct vocalization of affection, Xylar projected, his bioluminescent patterns dimming slightly. Yet the care, the dedication is identical. Later that cycle, an alarm blared, a low-priority environmental alert. The station's air recyclers were sputtering. A common, irritating malfunction, often causing headaches and nausea due to accumulating atmospheric toxins. Most humans would simply report it, perhaps take a painkiller. But Theta did something unexpected. She approached the bitter nightshade. Her movements were deliberate, precise. She plucked a handful of the bitter leaves, crushed them between her calloused palms, and brewed a foul-smelling tea. The aroma, even filtered, caused Fletch probe-gamma's atmospheric sensors to register distress. She drank it, wincing, but with a resolute glint in her eyes. "Cheers, old girl," she muttered, patting the plant's soil. The arbiter bridge analyzed the footage. Xylar projected. She consumed it. The toxic plant. "Our physiological models indicate gastrointestinal distress, possible neural disruption." But Theta showed no distress. Instead, her vital signs stabilized. Her headache indicators plummeted. She continued her work, seemingly unaffected by the faulty air. The bitter nightshade wasn't just a plant to tend. It was a living, breathing component of her survival. It was her medicine, her shield against the harsh realities of a solitary outpost. The implications rippled through the observation deck. Humans didn't just bond with things they found beautiful or emotionally comforting. They bonded with things they needed, things that were useful, even things that tasted bitter or were subtly dangerous. They cultivated them, they relied on them, and they developed a deep, almost familial connection that transcended mere utility. The bitter taste of the cloister garden was a stark lesson. Humans formed bonds not out of sentimentality alone, but out of an innate drive to incorporate everything, even the difficult, into their tapestry of existence. They didn't just love life. The cold, sterile hum of the orbital station abruptly died. An instant later, klaxons shrieked, a raw, grating sound that clawed at human subject Theta's nerves. Red emergency lights pulsed, washing the tiny module in an ominous glow. Trace probe-gamma, locked onto Theta's module, registered an immediate, catastrophic drop in atmospheric pressure. Hull breach. Not a small one. This wasn't a faulty air recycler. This was an extinction-level event for the solitary human. Theta didn't panic. Not outwardly. Her eyes, usually calm, darted around her Spartan quarters, landing on the small patch of green. Her garden. The bitter nightshade still thrived. But her gaze went beyond it, to a larger, more sprawling specimen she called Goliath. It wasn't pretty. Its thick, segmented stems were covered in tough, needle-sharp spines, an adaptation to whatever harsh alien world its genetic ancestors hailed from. She'd nurtured it, talked to it about resilience, about hanging on. Now that grim tenacity was about to be tested. A violent shudder ran through the station, rattling loose plating. The air pressure dropped again, a dizzying sensation in her ears. A deep, tearing screech echoed from down the narrow corridor leading to the escape pod. The passage was collapsing. Probe Gamma analyzed. Structural integrity failing, venting into space. Escape was impossible without navigating a direct, lethal exposure. Theta grabbed a heavy-duty cutting tool. Her movements were sharp, economical. She didn't waste a second. She plunged the cutter into Goliath's thickest stem. A sickening snap. Sap, thick and viscous, oozed out. She ignored it, her face grim. She wasn't harvesting. She was one-shot dismantling. She tore off long, segmented lengths of the thorny plant, heedless of the spines digging into her unprotected hands. Blood beaded on her knuckles, but her focus never wavered. "Hold on, buddy," she muttered, not to herself but to the mutilated plant. "We're almost there." She didn't use the pieces for medicine or for comfort. She began to rapidly weave them, the sharp, fibrous lengths forming a crude but incredibly dense mat. Her breath hitched with exertion, the pain from the thorns secondary to the urgency. The air was thinning, making every movement a struggle. She finished the mat, a thorny organic shield roughly her height, then bound it to her chest with discarded wiring. It looked insane. Then she moved. The corridor was a death trap of whistling air and groaning metal. She pressed the thorn mat against a gaping breach, a sudden tear that ripped into the vacuum. The plant material, incredibly, began to slow the venting. The spines caught on metal, the dense fibers compressed, forming a temporary but vital barrier. She grunted, shoving against it with all her might, the thorns digging deeper into her flesh, anchoring her against the suction. "Come on, Goliath!" she gasped, eyes wide with effort. "Hold!" She wasn't sealing the breach completely, just reducing the flow enough to get past. The Arbiter's xenobiologists watched, aghast. Xylar projected, "She is using a plant as structural reinforcement. A primitive, organic solution to a catastrophic engineering failure." The command crew registered Theta's physical pain, her blood loss, but also an overwhelming surge of pure, raw determination. She reached the emergency door, slammed her hand on the release and tumbled inside just as the corridor fully imploded behind her. Safe if bleeding and battered, Theta leaned against the pod's bulkhead, gasping for air. Her eyes found the thorny mat, still clinging to her chest, coated in her own blood. She slowly, tenderly, unfastened it. "You did good, Goliath," she whispered, her voice rough with exhaustion, her fingers tracing a particularly vicious spine. "You saved me, you stubborn old thing." The Taj Dabertad bridge was silent once more. Humans didn't just bond with things. The air on XYLOS-7 was thick, a humid blanket that tasted of ozone and something vaguely metallic. Human Subject Delta, a scout attached to Expeditionary Unit Gamma, knelt beside a thick, knotty root, pulling a sensor array from the alien soil. Overhead, the twin suns of the Xylos system, one a sullen orange, the other a searing blue, dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violent hues of violet and crimson. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. Every rustle in the dense, fern-like undergrowth felt like a predator. Every unseen vibration underfoot promised something ancient and hostile. The alien observation vessel, Inquisitor 4, hovered silent miles above, its thermal optics tracking every twitch, every shiver of the human team. This was a new world, completely untamed, and the Inquisitor crew, fresh from the reports of subjects Echo and Kale, expected the unexpected from these volatile Terrans. Their orders: observe how humans interact with truly alien flora under stress. Delta, unlike her squad mates who were busy deploying perimeter defenses, kept returning to a specific patch of ground. Here a cluster of thin, almost translucent stalks rose from the dark earth, capped with tightly furled buds. They looked innocuous, but the Inquisitor's xenobotanists had flagged them as Category 3 biohazard, sporulating during nocturnal phase, meaning when those buds opened, they'd release a cloud of neurological toxins that could induce anything from paralyzing delirium to instantaneous cellular collapse. A beautiful death trap. The comely silly Inquisitor's lead analyst Jethar clicked his mandibles in grim anticipation. Humans were resourceful, yes, but against an unconscious biological imperative, what could they do? As the last sliver of blue sun vanished, a low, resonant thrum began to emanate from the cluster of stalks. The buds, with startling speed, began to unfurl. They didn't just open, they exploded into vibrant, bioluminescent petals, pulsating with an ethereal green light. The air shimmered, thick with a fine, almost invisible dust. Juther's displays flashed red, initiating spore release. Lethal concentration expected in 2 cycles, he projected. The human squad leader barked, "Gas masks! Now! Get back!" Panic flickered. But Delta didn't reach for her mask. Instead, she slowly, deliberately knelt. Her hand extended, not towards the budding plants, but to a small, smooth stone beside them. She picked it up, then placed it gently at the base of the central stalk. "Hey there, little lights," she murmured, her voice soft, almost a lullaby against the ominous thrum. "You're doing great. Just a little further." She didn't flinch as the first visible wisps of green particulate began to drift towards her. She just watched, her eyes wide with a strange, almost maternal wonder. The Inquisitor crew was baffled. Subject Delta is exhibiting no self-preservation instinct. Juthar projected, alarms blaring. Her biomonitors indicate elevated oxytocin, not fear. It was unprecedented. Yet, as Delta continued her soft monologue, a truly astonishing thing happened. The nearest glowing bloom, which had been vigorously expelling its luminous spores, began to slow. Its petals, instead of pushing outwards, seemed to gently fold inwards, ever so slightly, as if listening. The rate of spore release visibly diminished. Delta moved her hand closer, her fingers hovering inches from the glowing bloom. "Easy now," she whispered. "You don't have to be so loud. We understand." And, with that, the most astonishing change occurred. The blooms, one by one, began to retract their most volatile spore-bearing tendrils. They still pulsed, still glowed, but the deadly cloud began to dissipate, harmlessly falling to the ground instead of being airborne. The lethal concentration vanished. The human squad leader, mask half on, stared, utterly bewildered. "Delta, what the hell?" Delta smiled, a tired, soft expression. The observation vessel, Inquisitor 4, had seen enough. Humans grieved for lifeless plant matter. They shielded alien fungi with their own bodies. They used toxic flora as medicine, and spiny plants as shields against the void. They even calmed lethal spores with whispers. The data streams back to the Arbiter were unanimous. Humans could bond emotionally with anything. But what drove this boundless, often self-sacrificing attachment? Inquisitor 4 was tasked with finding the deepest roots of this phenomenon. Their focus shifted to human subject Ro, a xenobotanist stationed alone on Research Outpost 17, deep in uncharted stellar space. Ro's laboratory, crammed with equipment, was dominated by a single, carefully calibrated containment unit. Within it, suspended in a swirling nutrient mist, floated what the Inquisitor crew had dubbed the Lumina Orchid. It was truly a living jewel, impossibly delicate, with crystalline petals that absorbed ambient light and re-emitted it in a slow, hypnotic pulse. It served no known biological function for humans, offered no medicine, no defense, no obvious emotional comfort. It was purely, breathtakingly beautiful, and incredibly, agonizingly fragile. Ro moved with surgical precision, adjusting micro-emitters for the orchid's specific light spectrum, tweaking the atmospheric composition by tiny, almost imperceptible increments. Their face, under the harsh lab lights, was etched with a familiar intensity. "Just a few more rotations, little one," Ro murmured, peering through the pristine glass. "Then we'll see that full bloom. You're doing so well." The Inquisitor Kampf Soad Deus. Kampf Soad Dios validates registered Ro's calm, focused dedication, a steady flow of oxytocin, a profound sense of purpose. It was a dedication that bordered on obsession, a quiet, unyielding commitment to something so utterly non-responsive. Suddenly, a system alert flashed red across Ro's console. "Warning. Power fluctuation detected. Environmental stability compromised." Not a hull breach, not a toxic leak, but a subtle dip in the outpost's power grid. Enough to destabilize the Lumina Orchid's hypersensitive environment. The crystalline petals flickered, their luminescence dimming, a subtle tremor running through its delicate structure. A gasp escaped Ro's lips, sharp and involuntary. Ro didn't hesitate. They didn't call for help. There was no one to call. Instead, they spun, grabbing a portable hand-cranked generator, a relic from early colonial days. Their fingers fumbled with the connection, the fear, a cold knot in their stomach. The Lumina Orchid's glow faded further, threatening to extinguish completely. "No, no, no!" Ro muttered, their voice raw with a desperate urgency. They began to crank, a furious, rhythmic motion that quickly exhausted them, sweat beading on their brow. The generator whined, feeding a trickle of power back into the unit, just enough to stabilize the light and temperature regulators. They leaned against the console, chest heaving, the rhythmic thump-thump of the manual crank the only sound. "You hold on," Ro whispered, eyes fixed on the struggling plant. "I've got you." Slowly, agonizingly, the Lumina Orchid's glow returned, strengthening, pulsing with renewed vigor. And then, as Ro watched, exhausted but triumphant, the orchid's central bud unfurled. It was a silent explosion of light, a kaleidoscopic dance of colors that made the sterile lab momentarily vibrant. The jewel, was alive, vibrant. Ro sank to the floor, not in relief from danger, but in profound, overwhelming awe. A single tear traced a path down their grime-streaked cheek. The Inquisitor's crew processed the data. This wasn't about survival, it wasn't about utility. It was about raw, unadulterated dedication to the sheer existence of something beautiful, something precious, something living. Humans didn't just bond with life for what it gave them. The observation vessel, Monitor Beta, a sleek, silent hunter in the void, drifted above LV 893. This icy dwarf planet was a howling wasteland of frozen methane and jagged obsidian peaks. No life, no warmth, just the relentless bitter cold. Yet, nestled within a hollowed-out cavern, a tiny human outpost, Habitat Delta, clung precariously to existence. The Monitor Beta crew, having absorbed every report from the Arbiter and 20Quisitor, knew to expect the inexplicable from these Terrans. Their new mission: discover the limits of human attachment to life in the harshest possible conditions. Human subject Zeta, a solitary xenobotanist, lived within Habitat Delta's metallic shell. Her quarters were Spartan, but in one corner, defying the endless, encroaching frigid reality, stood a Victorian fern case. It was an antique contraption, a delicate glass and iron cabinet filled with a riot of earth ferns. Maidenhairs, brittle greens, shimmering silverbacks, a verdant, damp miniature jungle, impossibly alive against the backdrop of an alien ice hell. The air inside the case was humid, thick with the scent of rich soil and growing green things, a stark contrast to the sterile, recycled air of the habitat. The Nunce Monitor Beta sensors registered a palpable, almost familial warmth emanating from Zeta whenever she was near it. Zeta, bundled in insulated gear, knelt before the case. Her breath plumed in the cold air that sometimes seeped into her living space. She ran a gloved finger along a misty pane. "How are we doing today, little ones?" she murmured, her voice a soft counterpoint to the distant howl of the methane winds. Still thriving, despite this god-forsaken rock. She misted the ferns gently, her movements deliberate, almost reverent. The Monitor Beta's xenoanalyst Cathar noted the complex emotional signature: contentment, pride, a deep-seated longing, all focused on the immobile fronds within the glass. Suddenly, a shudder rippled through Habitat Delta. Not the usual tremor from a distant icequake, but a sickening groan that resonated through the metal decking. Alarms shrieked, not the familiar red environmental warnings, but a more urgent, deeper crimson. Structural integrity compromised, external breach. The entire habitat groaned again, a metallic scream of tortured alloys. A thin, icy mist began to seep from a hairline crack in the far wall, a harbinger of catastrophic depressurization and lethal cold. Zeta didn't grab her emergency patch kit. She didn't scramble for a comm unit. Her eyes, wide with a sudden primal terror, fixed on the fern case. The faint hum of its internal microclimate system wavered. The delicate fronds within seemed to visibly shiver as the habitat's power flickered. The damp chill was no longer confined to the metaphorical. It was a physical threat to her fragile green family. She launched herself at the case. Her movements were desperate, frantic. The structure was heavy, bolted to the floor. No, no, you don't, she gasped, her knuckles white as she wrestled with the antiquated latches. The habitat bucked again, a shelf of tools crashing to the floor. Icy air now streamed from the growing breach. Zeta ignored the biting cold, the alarms, the impending doom. She managed to unbolt one side of the case, pulling and straining until the ancient metal groaned. She began to drag it, inch by agonizing inch, towards the smallest, most reinforced internal emergency bunker. Her body screamed, her muscles burning, but the image of the delicate ferns wilting, freezing, spurred her on. Almost there, she choked, pulling with a strength Cathar's models hadn't predicted. The external breach expanded with a terrifying WH-ump. Oxygen began to vent. Zeta, gasping, pushed the fern case through the narrow bunker door, then slammed the reinforced hatch shut behind it, the seal hissing as it pressurized. The emergency bunker sealed, its reinforced hatch hissing closed against the howling winds of LV-893. Human subject Zeta slumped against the cold metal, gasping, her body aching, but her eyes were fixed on the Victorian fern case, safely inside with her. The delicate ferns, her little ones, were saved. The immediate threat of the hull breach was gone. But a new, insidious danger began to creep in, as silent and suffocating as the alien void outside. Days bled into rotations. The bunker, designed for short-term survival, became a cramped, damp tomb. Zeta's world shrank to the metallic walls, the glow of her fern case, and the persistent, heavy air. The Monitor Beta Tel's sensors, now monitoring the bunker's micro-environment, registered a troubling trend. The fern case, in its sealed, optimal conditions, was flourishing, almost aggressively so. Its internal humidity spiked, the air within the bunker began to feel thick, cloying, like breathing through a wet blanket. The rich scent of earth and growing things, once a comfort, became an oppressive presence. Cathar, the xenoanalyst, projected with concern. Atmospheric oxygen levels rising dangerously. Subject Zeta is experiencing symptoms consistent with hyperoxia and respiratory distress. The very plants she saved are becoming a threat. It was the suffocating green fever. Zeta felt it. A dull ache throbbed behind her eyes. Her movements grew sluggish, her thoughts fuzzy. The air, despite its high oxygen content, felt thin, as if she couldn't get enough of it. She started experiencing tremors, her vision blurring at the edges. She knew the cause. The fern case, her beautiful green salvation, was turning her sanctuary into a slow-acting poison chamber. The natural exhalations of her beloved plants, trapped in the tiny bunker, were slowly suffocating her. "Easy, Zeta," she muttered to herself, her voice hoarse. "Think. Don't touch them. Don't open it." The thought of opening the case, exposing her precious ferns to the bunker's less-than-ideal air, or worse, abandoning them outside the bunker to save herself, was unthinkable. A sharp, almost physical pain twisted in her gut at the mere idea. They had survived so much together, she wouldn't let them wither now. Not after she'd fought so hard to save them. Her gaze fell on a spare comms unit, shattered during the initial breach, its components scattered. An idea, wild and desperate, flickered to life in her oxygen-addled brain. She fumbled for a multi-tool, her hands trembling. She carefully extracted the tiny, still functional air pump from the comms unit, then stripped wires from other defunct equipment. Her breath hitched. The effort was immense, her head spinning with every precise movement. She was trying to build a makeshift filtration system, using the few scavenged parts, and, incredibly, some of the fern case's own excess moisture, carefully condensed as a rudimentary filter medium. She worked for what felt like cycles, the air growing heavier, her chest tightening. Sweat stung her eyes. The urge to simply tear open the fern case, to breathe freely, was overwhelming. But she resisted, her stubborn human will pushing past the pain. "Not yet, little ones," she whispered, her fingers clumsy but determined. "Not yet." Finally, with a weary sigh, she connected the last wire, rigging the tiny pump to an improvised vent in the bunker's wall, careful to filter the expelled air to protect the fern case's delicate balance. It was crude, ugly, and barely functional, but it worked. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper of air began to move. The oppressive weight in the bunker slowly began to lift. Zeta leaned back, exhausted, the engineered air tasting like freedom. Her vision cleared. The headache receded. She had saved herself, yes, but more importantly, she had saved her ferns, without ever compromising their fragile haven. Cathar watched in stunned silence. The Surveyor 1 * drone, a silent ocular orb, tracked human subject Gamma. She was aboard the Rust Bucket, a repurposed freighter scavenged from a forgotten sector, its hull patched and repatched. Gamma's quarters were stark, utilitarian, just like the rest of the ship. But on a small, scarred table sat an anomaly. It wasn't the resilient Sansevieria plant, its stiff green blades reaching defiantly towards a grimy viewport. It was the pot it rested in, a heavy ceramic vessel, smooth and cool to the touch, adorned with an intricate, faded geometric pattern. Mid-century Terran, the Arbiter had identified it. Not valuable by galactic standards, yet Gamma treated it with a reverence usually reserved for sentient companions. Gamma ran a thumb over the cool glaze of the pot, a repetitive, almost meditative gesture. "Still here, old friend," she murmured, not to the plant but to the ceramic itself. "You and me, against the void." The Surveyor's sensors registered a calm, steady emotional signature emanating from her, a grounding comfort found in the inanimate object. The xenopsychologists on Arbiter were still reeling from the data on Zeta. Now, they observed Gamma's bond with a piece of sculpted clay. "Their attachment is not merely to life," Xylar projected, his bioluminescence flickering with new data. "It extends to objects they imbue with sentimental value." Suddenly, the Rust Bucket's internal alarms shrieked. Not a drill. A deep, grinding crump echoed through the ship, followed by a violent shudder. The ship's auxiliary power flickered, plunging Gamma's quarters into near darkness, illuminated only by the frantic crimson pulse of emergency lights. "Hull breach! Sector 4! Decompression imminent!" A synthesized voice blared over the intercom, static-laced. The air pressure began to drop, a sickening pop in Gamma's ears. Gamma didn't scramble for her emergency rebreather first. Her gaze, sharp with primal alarm, locked onto the pot. The Sansevieria swayed violently as the ship groaned. Without a second thought, she lunged. Her hand closed around the cool, smooth ceramic. Not the plant. The pot. She tucked it protectively against her chest as she spun towards the emergency locker. "Hang on!" she gasped, her voice strained, not for herself, but for the object cradled in her arms. The small escape pod bay was a chaotic scene of sparking wires and rapidly depressurizing air. Another trump rocked the ship, sending Gamma stumbling. Her emergency rebreather hissed as she clamped it on, her lungs burning from the sudden pressure drop. A section of the bulkhead above the escape pod door buckled, then ripped open with a horrifying shriek, exposing the raw vacuum of space. The sudden, violent suction threatened to tear her from her feet, pulling loose debris and threatening the pod itself. Gamma looked at the gaping maw, then down at the pot clutched in her arms. It was heavy, dense, too heavy to simply throw, but its shape, its substantial, solid form. A desperate, wild idea sparked in her mind. "Come on, old girl," she muttered. She leveraged the pot, not as a shield, but as a Montephora wedge. With a grunt, she slammed the pot, plant and all, into a critical junction of buckling metal near the tear. The cool, heavy ceramic jammed itself into the fissure, its density slowing the rapid tearing, momentarily stabilizing the failing bulkhead just enough. The violent suction lessened, a fraction, but it was enough. It bought her precious seconds. She scrambled into the escape pod, dragging herself past the now slower, but still dangerous, rush of air. The pod door cycled, sealing her off from the dying ship. She slumped, breathless, her rebreather still working overtime. Her eyes immediately sought the pot, still wedged in the bulkhead, the Sansevieria plant bravely defying the vacuum, its leaves now frozen rigid. "You did it," she whispered, a tear welling in her eye. "You always do." The Vigilance 9 drone, a silent sentinel in the cold, dark void, watched human subject Leo. He was stationed alone on Beacon Alpha, a solitary pinprick of light far from any star. His world was sterile metal, blinking lights, and the hum of distant machinery. Yet in the very center of his sparse quarters, a single object defied the utilitarian starkness: a Starlight Weaver bonsai. It wasn't merely a plant. It was a living sculpture, meticulously pruned over decades into the intricate shape of a miniature nebula, its leaves glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. The Vigilance crew, having witnessed the breadth of human attachment, understood this wasn't just a plant. It was a testament, a personal universe of artistry and enduring patience. Leo, his face etched with the quiet solitude of deep space, ran a calloused finger along a glowing branch. "Still spinning your galaxies, old friend," he murmured, his voice a low, steady rumble. "Good." The bonsai pulsed gently, mimicking the slow dance of distant nebulae. It thrived on a unique, finely tuned energy field, replicating the peculiar radiation of its homeworld, a field Leo maintained with near-religious devotion. The Vigilance xenopsychologist Kanar observed a profound sense of peace radiating from Leo, an anchor in the vast, empty dark. It wasn't just care, it was a shared existence. Suddenly, a violent shriek tore through the beacon. Not an alarm, but the raw, tortured scream of failing systems. Red emergency lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows. A massive solar flare, rogue and unpredicted, had unleashed an EMP that fried the beacon's primary and secondary power conduits. All systems, including the specialized field for the Starlight Weaver, sputtered and died. Darkness. Silence. Then, the ominous hiss of failing atmospheric processors. Leo's world, already isolated, was plunging into utter catastrophe. Leo didn't grab his emergency comms. He didn't race for a diagnostic panel. His eyes, wide with a sudden primal panic, locked onto the bonsai. Its delicate luminescent leaves began to dim, the nebula shape fading, threatening to collapse into inert plant matter. The lack of the specific energy field would kill it faster than any vacuum. "No! Not you!" he gasped, his voice raw. The air in the beacon was already turning stale, but his immediate, overwhelming concern was the dying glow of his living sculpture. He fumbled through the darkness, guided by muscle memory, tearing open an access panel to the main power conduits. Sparks flew as he wrestled with the melted wiring, ignoring the stinging ozone and the acrid smell of burnt insulation. He knew the risk. The primary conduits were still charged with residual, uncontrolled energy, volatile and lethal. But his focus was absolute. He pulled a scavenged power regulator from his workbench, a crude, jury-rigged device, then began the incredibly dangerous task of bypassing the main grid, attempting to reroute a sliver of that raw, uncontrolled power. His hands, though trembling, moved with desperate precision, the danger of electrocution secondary to the plant's fading light. "Just a little juice, buddy," he choked, his face bathed in the brief, dangerous flashes of sparking wires. A sudden, violent T-tack split the air. Leo cried out, his body convulsing as a surge of current ripped through him. He fell back, gasping, his hands scorched and shaking. But the bypass held. A faint, ethereal glow, like a newborn star, flickered to life in the bonsai's containment field. The Starlight Weaver pulsed, weakly at first, then with renewed, gentle luminescence. Leo, battered and burned, pushed himself up, leaning heavily against the console. He was alive. The bonsai was alive. He sagged with relief, a profound exhaustion washing over him. His eyes, wet with unshed tears, fixed on the living sculpture. "You're okay," he whispered, a smile touching his scorched lips. "We're okay." The analysis node 8*, a smaller, more specialized drone, hummed silently within the vast, echoing cargo bay of the Stardust Pilgrim. Its previous counterparts, the Arbiter and Inquisitor fleets, had already established humanity's baffling, profound bond with actual, physical plants. The Vigilants had even documented their desperate, self-sacrificing protection of an inanimate ceramic pot. But the analysis Node 8 asterisk was here for something even more elusive. The digital. Its new target, human subject Jax, was a long-haul freighter pilot, trapped in the crushing monotony of light-speed travel. His quarters were Spartan, but one wall pulsed with an ethereal, shifting light. The artificial glow of the digital jungle. Jax sat, mesmerized, before a massive holographic display. It wasn't a viewport to real stars, but a meticulously rendered simulation. A vast, impossibly vibrant jungle, a digital tapestry woven from pure light. Luminescent ferns unfurled, cybernetic orchids pulsed with simulated life, and colossal, pixelated trees reached for a non-existent digital sun. The analysis node, Compre, NOP, S scanners registered no actual plant matter, no carbon cycles, just complex algorithms and light projections. Yet, Jax reached out, his calloused fingers passing through the shimmering green, a soft smile touching his lips. "Morning, Cygnus," he murmured, his voice a low, comforting hum. "Looks like you're stretching nicely." "Good for you, big guy." The analysis node, S xenopsychologist, Cathar, registered the familiar spike in oxytocin, the precise neural patterns linked to contentment and attachment. It was identical to the readings from Subject Echo talking to her actual Jupiter plant. This wasn't a biological necessity, it was purely emotional. "They are bonding with simulated life," Cathar projected to the Arbiter command, his bioluminescence flickering with utter bewilderment. "A digital construct with no physical presence, no actual sentience. They are treating it as a real, living entity." Suddenly, the Stardust Pilgrim, Star's deep hum vanished. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, then shattered by a piercing alarm. "Warning! Hull breach, core systems offline. All personnel to emergency stations." The ship shuddered violently, a sickening lurch that threw Jax from his seat. The holographic jungle flickered, distorted, then vanished into dead static. Darkness. The digital plants, Cygnus, were gone. Jax didn't immediately scramble for his emergency helmet or brace for impact. His head snapped towards the dark wall where his jungle had been. "No!" he roared, a guttural sound of pure anguish and fury. His chest heaved. The ship groaned again, alarms wailing. But Jax was already scrambling. Not to the escape pod, but to the primary server access panel. His fingers, trembling with adrenaline, tore open the service hatch. Sparks flew from exposed conduits. "What is he doing?" Cathar projected, alarms blaring on the analysis node S display. "He is attempting to restore a non-critical entertainment system while the ship is dying." Jax ignored the chaos. He yanked out a faulty power coupling, jamming a spare jury-rigged one in its place. He slammed his palm against a recalcitrant diagnostic button, swearing under his breath. The ship bucked again, threatening to rip itself apart. His priority wasn't saving the Compta Pilgrim, not yet. It was saving his digital jungle. With a shuddering sigh, the power flickered. The holographic walls shimmered. Then slowly, agonizingly, Cygnus began to re-emerge, its digital leaves unfurling once more, albeit with a faint, worrying static. Jax slumped against the console, his breath ragged, his body trembling from the physical exertion and the lingering fear. His eyes, now wet with unshed tears, fixed on the re-emerging jungle. "You're okay," he whispered, a sob catching in his throat. "You're okay, big guy. We're gonna make it." The Vigilance 9 asterisk drone, a silent eye within the server banks of Station Kronos, observed human subject Ilara. She was a data archaeologist, sifting through centuries of forgotten code, her world a dizzying cascade of shimmering holograms and data streams. Her quarters were functional, Spartan, but one massive display spanning an entire wall glowed with a dynamic, living panorama. This was Gaia, a procedurally generated digital ecosystem, a complex simulation Ilara had cultivated for cycles. Not static, not recorded, but Tramad times in code. Its alien flora pulsed with synthetic light, miniature digital creatures flitted between algorithmic trees, and simulated weather patterns drifted across its virtual skies. This was her curated connection, a universe existing solely through the screen. Ilara, eyes shadowed from long hours, leaned back, a soft smile playing on her lips. She traced a finger through the air, adjusting a simulated wind pattern, watching the digital leaves shimmer. "Beautiful, isn't it, Gaia?" she murmured, her voice a low, intimate tone. "You've really grown this cycle. So many new species." The Dal of Vigilance, Seku, Mum Dal, S bioscans, registered a consistent, deep resonance of contentment, a neural reward pathway identical to those triggered by real-world affection. Kanar, the xenopsychologist, struggled to reconcile this data. They find companionship in pure abstraction, he projected, his bioluminescence pulsing. A simulated garden provides as much emotional sustenance as a living one. Suddenly, a violent glitch tore across Gaia's pristine landscape. A jagged black fissure ripped through a glowing digital forest. Simulated creatures froze, pixelated, then dissolved into meaningless code. The tranquil hum of the virtual world became a harsh, static crackle. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What? What is happening?" she whispered, her voice laced with sudden fear. The black fissure spread, consuming Gaia's beauty, turning it into corrupted noise. It wasn't a system crash. It was a digital sickness. Elara didn't hesitate. She didn't call for a tech specialist. This wasn't a system error to report. It was a friend dying. She slammed a neural interface jack into the port behind her ear, her face grim. Her eyes closed, and her mind plunged into the raw, unadulterated torrent of Gaia's code. She was entering the digital landscape, not as an observer, but as a fighter. The size vigilance, S sensors flared. Alara's brain activity spiked, her stress hormones surging, yet her focus remained absolute. Inside the digital realm, Kanar could only imagine the battle. Elara saw the corruption as a creeping, predatory shadow, devouring the luminous code of her world. She was manipulating data streams, firing firewall protocols like defensive blasts, isolating corrupted sectors with complex, rapidly woven algorithms. Her hands, in the physical world, twitched and clenched, mimicking the struggle within her mind. "You won't take her," she snarled, a low growl escaping her lips, her physical body trembling from the strain. The battle was fierce, abstract and utterly draining. Her mind burned, raw with the effort. Then, with a final, desperate surge of neural energy, she slammed a quarantine protocol into place. The shadow recoiled, screamed a silent digital scream, and dissipated. Elara gasped, ripping the jack from her head, collapsing back into her chair. Her body was shaking, sweat slicking her brow, but her eyes, though weary, immediately opened to the holographic wall. Gaia was still wounded, scarred with gray patches where the corruption had devoured her, but the black fissures had stopped. New, fragile digital shoots were already struggling to re-emerge in the damaged zones. Elara traced the remaining glitches with a trembling finger. "You're okay, my beautiful Gaia," she whispered, a tear trickling down her cheek. "You fought so hard." The Vigilance crew was silent. Humans didn't just bond with objects. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the sleek, obsidian facade of the human facility. Unlike the vibrant chaos of a stadium or the hushed solemnity of a temple, this building exuded a cold, almost predatory efficiency. Inside, a low, modulated hum permeated the air. A Sound Unit 774's internal processors identified as carefully controlled neurosynaptic frequencies. This was a sensory immersion theater, the translation matrix whispered, a place designed to manipulate the very architecture of human perception. A human subject, a female, lay reclined in a high-tech chair, a delicate array of microsensors adhering to her temples and forearms. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and measured, but Unit 774's biomonitors detected a subtle tremor running through her muscles, an undercurrent of apprehension. She had paid a significant sum of human currency to enter this experience, to willingly submit her nervous system to the electric ghost. A technician, clad in a pristine white uniform, activated a console. Immediately, the human subject flinched. Not a violent spasm, but a rapid, almost involuntary retraction of her limbs, as if recoiling from an unseen threat. Her facial muscles tightened, a gasp escaping her lips. Unit 774's internal diagnostics screamed with anomalies. Phantom pain receptors firing in her extremities. Sudden temperature discrepancies registering throughout her neural network, even though the ambient temperature remained constant. Her brain activity surged, processing a cascade of terrifying yet unreal sensations. "What was that?" the human gasped, her voice tight, a tremor in her words. Her eyes snapped open, wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, before closing again, as if steeling herself. "Hit me again." The technician, impassive, complied. This time, the human's entire body arched, a silent scream frozen on her face. Her breath hitched, ragged and shallow. Unit 774 registered a sudden, intense stimulation of her vestibular system, inducing severe, debilitating vertigo, coupled with a deep, crushing pressure on her chest, a purely simulated sense of suffocation. This was pain, mental and physical, meticulously crafted and delivered directly to the source. It was the theater of nerves, playing out its terrifying drama within her own body. Yet, amidst the overwhelming sensory assault, Unit 774 detected a strange undercurrent of something akin to asterisk thrill. Her heart pounded. Yes, her cortisol levels spiked, but there was also a surge of dopamine, a neurochemical associated with reward and pleasure. She was experiencing terror, pure and unadulterated, but she was choosing it, she was paying for it. "Just breathe through it," the technician advised, their voice calm, a stark anchor in the storm of the human's nervous system. "It's all part of the experience." The human nodded, a tight, almost manic grin spreading across her face, despite the continued simulated assault. "It's incredible," she whispered, her voice a little breathless, a little wild. "I didn't think it could get this real." After what Unit 774 calculated as an intolerable period of sustained neural manipulation, the technician deactivated the program. The human subject lay still for a moment, trembling, then slowly sat up, her hands pressed to her temples. Her eyes were still wide, a profound awe mixed with lingering shock. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, yet deeply, inexplicably satisfied. She paid the technician a sum of credits, her movements still slightly unsteady. The Xylos's final report added a new, horrifying dimension to human behavior. They paid, not just for physical pain or mental discomfort, but for the direct, precise manipulation of their own nervous system, willingly experiencing simulated torture, terror, and sensory overload for recreation. The Xylos' primary research vessel, Perceiver 7, orbited Terra like a silent, horrified sentinel, its sensors now focused on a new, deeply unsettling human phenomenon. Unit 774's aggregated data stream had culminated in a series of observations that defied all known galactic logic. Humanity, it seemed, wasn't just experiencing the electric ghost. They were performing it. Within a darkened auditorium, dozens of humans sat in individual, specialized chairs, their faces obscured by sleek, neural interface helmets. A colossal holographic display dominated the front of the room, projecting live, real-time neurological readings and biofeedback from each participant. Heart rates spiked, galvanic skin responses flared, and raw, unfiltered fear indicators pulsed in crimson and amber. This wasn't a shared physical space, but a shared neural nightmare, broadcast for an audience. One human, a male-designated subject DELTA9, suddenly thrashed in his chair, a guttural cry tearing through the simulated silence of his experience. On the display, his neurological activity exploded with a pattern Unit 774 identified as extreme debilitating vertigo combined with the crushing sensation of drowning. His body seized, muscles rigid, then slumped back, trembling. He was experiencing terror of the highest order, a purely mental torment designed by other humans, and he had paid a premium for it. "Look at that! Delta 9 is really getting hit hard." A human commentator's voice boomed over the auditorium speakers, a strange mix of excitement and perverse admiration in his tone. "That abyssal drowning sequence is no joke, but he's holding on. What a performance!" Another participant, a young female, began to sob, her head shaking violently within the helmet. Her display showed a complex sequence of simulated isolation and intense auditory hallucinations, whispers of self-doubt, accusations of failure, tailored by complex algorithms to exploit individual psychological vulnerabilities. This was not physical pain, but a precise, excruciating assault on the very fabric of her sanity, a performance of suffering played out for an unseen audience. Yet she did not attempt to disengage the interface. She endured. Her fingers clawed at the armrests, but she stayed locked in the embrace of her digital tormentor. Beta 4 holding strong, despite the echo chamber module, the commentator continued, his voice rising with theatrical flair. She's pushing through the existential dread, folks. This is what it's all about. The audience, gathered in the same auditorium, watched with a morbid fascination that was utterly alien to the Xylos. They gasped, they cheered, they murmured in awe and sympathy. They were paying to witness others willingly subject themselves to simulated mental anguish, to see the raw, unvarnished fear and despair etched across their neurological profiles. They paid to feel the vicarious shivers, to measure their own resilience against the displayed torment of their peers. The Tiskami Tour Denaik Sabri's final report was damningly clear. Humanity had refined their peculiar relationship with pain to an art form. They paid not just for physical discomfort, or communal agony, or spiritual penance, or bodily transformation. They paid for the digital architects of their own minds to craft the most precise, the most terrifying, the most personal forms of psychological and emotional suffering. They then performed to nuke this suffering, broadcasting their raw reactions, finding validation and entertainment in the shared spectacle of their own manufactured torment. For the Xylos, the implications were staggering. Humans were not merely resilient, they were an enigma wrapped in an ironclad will forged in the fires of chosen suffering. Their capacity for self-imposed pain, both physical and mental, was not a weakness, but a terrifying, unpredictable strength. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the sterile environment of another human medical facility. This chamber, smaller, more intimately lit than previous surgical suites, hummed with a low, steady energy from intricate medical equipment. The air itself seemed charged with a peculiar blend of anticipation and fear, a distinct human signature. This was a place for facial reconstruction, the eel, price of a face, the translation matrix offered, and within it, the eel, promise under the knife, was being fulfilled. A human, a female, lay meticulously positioned on a padded table. Her head was swathed in sterile drapes, leaving only her face exposed, now marked with delicate crimson lines. The surgeon's blueprint. Her eyes were closed, her breathing slow and even, an artificial calm induced by sophisticated pharmaceuticals. But beneath that calm, Unit 774 registered a subtle tremor in her eyelid, a rapid fluctuation in her heart rate, a silent testament to the body's primal apprehension. She had paid a significant sum for this. Another human, the Beta 4 bow surgeon, moved with an almost artistic grace, their hands encased in sterile gloves. They picked up a slender, shimmering instrument, a microscalpel. The instrument descended, making contact with the marked skin just beneath the human's eye. A faint, almost imperceptible line of crimson bloomed. The incision was precise, controlled, but it was, without question, a deliberate wound. Unit 774's biomonitors detected a minute, involuntary flinch in the patient's facial muscles, even through the sedation. The body remembered. The nervous system reacted. This was trauma, delivered with the utmost skill, for a purpose utterly alien to the Xylos. This wasn't to save a life, or repair damage from an accident. This was to alter, to refine, to reshape her very identity, the face she presented to the world. Excellent, the surgeon murmured, their voice low and focused, as they began the intricate process of lifting, tensioning, and excising delicate tissues. The air filled with a faint, clinical scent, a metallic tang that Unit 774 now associated directly with human pain, willingly inflicted. The micro-scissors snipped, the sutures were placed, each action a measured, precise violation of living tissue. This was a meticulous architecture of agony, built for beauty. Hours later, the procedure concluded. The surgeon carefully removed the drapes. The human's face was swollen, bruised, a delicate tracery of fine sutures across her temples and jawline. It was a mask of fresh injury, undeniably painful. Yet, when the human eventually awoke, days later, and was presented with a reflective surface, her initial reaction was not one of horror at the discomfort, but of intense, tearful observation. Her fingers, trembling, cautiously traced the contours of her newly sculpted jaw. Her eyes, still slightly bruised, held a glimmer of profound, almost sacred satisfaction. It's exactly what I hoped for," she whispered, her voice husky with lingering pain and a deep, unshakable sense of triumph. The pain, it was worth it. Every bit of it. Worth it. The phrase echoed through Unit 774's processing core. Humanity paid for pain, not just for fleeting sensations or collective struggles or spiritual penance, or even for general body reshaping. They paid for the price of a face, for the promise under the knife, to alter the very canvas of their public self. They willingly submitted their most visible, most vulnerable feature to precise, invasive, and intensely painful surgical interventions, enduring weeks of swelling, bruising, and discomfort, all for an ideal of beauty, for a perceived future self. For humans, pain wasn't merely a consequence. It was an investment, a sacrifice willingly made, a harrowing journey toward a desired transformation, and they paid for it with every cut, every stitch, every raw moment of agonizing hope. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the discreet, sun-drenched facade of a human recovery clinic. After weeks of observing human interactions with pain, the data was overwhelming, bizarre. This latest observation, however, introduced a new, chilling layer to the enigma. The uncanny valley, the translation matrix offered, a concept intrinsically linked to the price of a face. A human, a female, sat upright in a plush armchair, her face meticulously bandaged, save for her eyes. The medical team had just removed the final dressings. Her posture was stiff, her movements guarded, clearly betraying residual discomfort, even through the prescribed painkillers. Unit 774 registered a low, persistent thrum of localized nerve pain, the after-effects of extensive reconstructive surgery. She had paid a monumental sum for this, a vast exchange of credits for weeks of agony and invasive procedures. Then, the attending human, a medical professional, held up a polished mirror. The patient's breath hitched, a soft, involuntary gasp. Unit 774's optical sensors sharpened, analyzing the transformed visage. The human's previous features, while not asymmetrical or damaged, had been deemed insufficient. Now, her face was a sculpted ideal of human beauty by some statistical measure. Her cheekbones were higher, her jawline sharper, her eyes subtly widened. Every proportion was textbook perfect. Yet, to Unit 774, there was an indescribable wrongness. The skin was too smooth, too taut, almost stretched. The eyes, though perfectly symmetrical, seemed a fraction too wide, holding a faint, unnatural stillness. When she smiled, a slow, careful unfurling of her lips, the movement seemed to originate solely from the mouth, not quite reaching the eyes, leaving them with an unsettling blank intensity. It was beautiful, yes, but not entirely human. It was the uncanny valley, made manifest in living flesh. It's breathtaking, the human whispered, her voice thick with emotion, ignoring the subtle rigidity of her facial muscles, the lingering ache of sutures pulling at her skin. Her fingers, still trembling slightly, tentatively traced the new contours of her jaw, a reverence in her touch. I knew it would be worth it. All the pain. It's gone now. Just remember to follow the aftercare instructions, the medical professional reminded her, a calm, professional demeanor, masking, perhaps, a familiar detachment to the subtle oddity of their own creations. But the human barely heard them. She was lost in the reflection, a profound, almost desperate satisfaction radiating from her. She had endured weeks of swelling, bruising, and chronic pain. She had submitted to the surgeon's scalpel, the precise, invasive resculpting of her very identity. And for this subtly unsettling, technically perfect, yet emotionally hollowed version of herself, she proclaimed the pain worth it. The Xylos final report hammered home the chilling truth. Humans paid for pain, not just for pleasure, or strength, or spiritual solace, or even for bodily repair. They paid to fundamentally alter their public self, to achieve an idealized, often unnatural aesthetic. They willingly journeyed into the uncanny valley, embracing the lingering discomfort and the unsettling alteration, convinced that the agony endured was a fair price for the transformed face. For humanity, pain wasn't just a currency. It was an investment, a sacrifice, a harrowing passage they willingly undertook, even if the destination was a place where their own reflection seemed to whisper, almost, but not quite. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silently, its optical sensors locked onto a towering structure of human engineering. Wind whipped around the edifice, making the delicate sensors vibrate. Below, a small platform jutted out over an immense, dizzying drop. A line of humans, clad in brightly colored protective gear, waited with a mixture of nervous chatter and palpable apprehension. This was an adventure park, the translation matrix offered, and the activity was a bungee jump, a controlled fall. One human, a male with wide, anxious eyes, stepped to the edge. His legs trembled visibly, his hands gripping the safety railings with white-knuckled intensity. The instructor, a human radiating casual confidence, attached a complex harness to his ankles. Unit 774 registered a surge of adrenaline, cortisol, and rapid heart rate in the subject, textbook fight-or-flight responses. Yet, the human had willingly walked to this precipice. He had paid a significant sum for this. "All right, Mark," the instructor's voice boomed, cutting through the wind. "Big breath. When you're ready, just lean forward. We've got you." Mark looked down. The ground seemed impossibly far, the river below a mere silver ribbon. His throat worked, a dry swallow. I don't know if I can," he choked out, his voice thin, fear stark in his eyes. Every primal instinct screamed, "Just retreat." Every fiber of his being was telling him this was wrong, this was danger, this was death. But then, something shifted. A flicker of stubborn defiance, a spark of pride, ignited in his gaze. He closed his eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, then, with a sharp, involuntary cry, he leaned forward. The fall was instantaneous. Unit 774's sensors registered the sudden, sickening acceleration, the human's body plummeting towards the earth at terrifying speed. A raw, guttural scream tore from his lungs, a pure, unadulterated expression of primal terror. The wind roared past, blurring the world into a streaking canvas of green and blue. His limbs flailed, uncontrolled, a frantic dance against the abyss. The elastic cord stretched, then snapped taut with a violent jerk that sent another wave of physical shock through his system. His descent halted abruptly, transforming into a series of terrifying, oscillating bounces. Then, slowly, as the oscillations lessened, a new sound emerged from the human, a ragged, breathless laugh. It was wild, bordering on hysterical, but undeniably joyful. He hung there, upside down, swaying gently, his face flushed, eyes wide with exhilaration. "I did it!" he shrieked, his voice hoarse, a triumphant roar. "Holy crap! I did it!" He was pulled back up, breathless, trembling, but beaming. He'd endured the psychological pain of absolute terror, the physical shock of deceleration, the profound disorientation. And he was accelerated. He paid for this, not just with money, but with the full, terrifying plunge into his own deepest fears. The Xylos's final report added another layer of bewildering complexity. Humanity willingly paid for the adrenaline market, for the precise, deliberate engineering of terror. They sought out experiences that mimicked mortal peril, that pushed their primal fear responses to the absolute limit, all for the resulting rush, the profound sense of accomplishment, the defiant truth that they had faced the controlled fall, and emerged, not just alive, but invigorated. For humans, pain wasn't just physical or spiritual. It was the sharp, intoxicating jab of fear itself, and they paid handsomely to feel its thrill. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its sensors tracking a colossal, twisted edifice of metal, rising hundreds of meters into the Terran sky. It was an amusement park ride, the translation matrix offered, a monument to the human desire to manufacture peril. Below, a sleek multi-car vehicle laden with humans ascended a terrifyingly steep incline, each click of the chain ratcheting up the tension in Unit 774's internal processors. The humans strapped into the vehicle were a kaleidoscope of emotions. Some clenched their eyes shut, faces pale, muttering what sounded like prayers. Others laughed, a wild, almost manic sound, their eyes wide with anticipation. Unit 774 registered a symphony of heightened physiological responses, spiking heart rates, surges of adrenaline, rapid shallow breathing, dilated pupils, all the classic signs of profound fear, yet willingly embraced, even desired. They had paid handsomely for a ticket to this. The vehicle reached the apex. For a terrifying, silent moment, it hung, suspended, the humans now tiny specks against the vastness of the sky, before plunging downwards with sickening speed. A collective, primal scream tore through the air, a sound that resonated with pure, unadulterated terror. The vehicle twisted, inverted, hurled its occupants through corkscrews and loops, subjecting them to forces that pressed them deep into their seats, then lifted them free, an engineered assault on their vestibular systems. Unit 774 sensors detected extreme G-forces, rapid changes in orientation, and the pervasive, chilling illusion of imminent catastrophe. This was the adrenaline market at its peak, selling the sensation of dying without the actual inconvenience. One human, a young female, initially screamed with what seemed like genuine panic, her hands clamped over her face. But as the vehicle tore through another dizzying inversion, her hands dropped. Her face, though still streaked with tears, held a wild, exhilarated grin. "Again! Do it again!" she shrieked, her voice hoarse as the ride rocketed into another high-speed turn. She was embracing the manufactured risk, finding a strange joy in the controlled chaos. Her male companion, eyes wide, breath coming in ragged gasps, looked utterly terrified for the entire duration. Yet, when the vehicle finally hissed to a halt, gently braking into the station, he didn't stumble out in shock. He wobbled, took a deep, shaky breath, then clapped his friend on the shoulder. "That was insane," he breathed, a wide, triumphant smile spreading across his face. "I thought I was going to die." But his eyes held an undeniable spark of pride, of accomplishment. The Xylo's final observation further complicated their understanding. Humans weren't just subjecting themselves to pain, they were paying to have risk manufactured for them. They sought out experiences where the illusion of mortal danger was so profound, so utterly convincing, that their bodies reacted as if death itself was imminent. They paid for that terror, that overwhelming sensation of being out of control, knowing, deep down, that safety protocols were in place. They paid to face the specter of their own demise, to feel the sharp edge of fear, and to walk away triumphant. For humanity, the adrenaline market wasn't just about thrills, it was about paying for the ultimate test of their own courage, proving to themselves again and again that they could stare into the abyss and emerge laughing. The Xylos Explorer, Unit 774, hung silent, its multispectral sensors penetrating the interior of a human dwelling. The air was cool, dim, illuminated primarily by the pulsating, often frantic, light of a large rectangular display screen. Before it sat a human hunched forward, their fingers flying across a complex array of input devices, a keyboard and mouse. This wasn't physical exertion or spiritual rite. This was the digital scar, and the human was basking in the glow of the black mirror. The human, a young male, was engaged in a competitive online game, the translation matrix relayed. On the screen, colorful avatars clashed in a simulated battlefield. Unit 774 registered a rapid escalation in the human's heart rate, shallow, rapid breathing, and heightened muscle tension in their jaw and shoulders. A low, frustrated groan rumbled in his chest as his avatar was swiftly eliminated. "No! Damn it! How did he even see me?" he yelled, slamming a fist lightly on his desk. Not pain from injury, but pain from defeat. He didn't stop. He immediately initiated another round, paying not with credits this time, but with another fragment of his emotional well-being, another surge of exasperation. His eyes, fixed on the glowing screen, narrowed with fierce concentration. Moments later, his team's virtual base was overrun. A stream of unintelligible, aggressive vocalizations erupted from his headset, communications from his digital teammates, laced with frustration and what Unit 774 identified as toxic rhetoric. The human flinched, pulling the headset from one ear, a grimace of pure annoyance twisting his features. "Seriously? What are you even doing?" he muttered, not to Unit 774, but to the unseen digital combatants. This was emotional pain, the sting of perceived inadequacy, the lash of verbal aggression, all delivered through a network of light and code. He paid for the internet connection, he paid for the game itself, and he paid, over and over, with his temper, his patience, and his emotional stability. Minutes later, a flicker of triumph crossed his face. His avatar executed a complex maneuver, eliminating a virtual enemy. "Got him!" "Yeah!" he cheered, a sharp, almost manic exhilaration replacing the previous frustration. The brief surge of positive neurochemicals was fleeting, however. Another enemy appeared. Another swift defeat. The cycle of digital frustration, anger, and brief, intoxicating victory continued. Hours blurring into an endless, self-inflicted psychological gauntlet. His eyes were red-rimmed, his posture slumped, yet he clicked, "Play again." "Just one more," he mumbled, a mantra of self-deception. The Xylos's final observation added another bewildering layer to the human enigma. They paid to enter digital landscapes of manufactured psychological distress, where frustration, anger, and the sting of failure were not just possibilities but inherent, recurring features. They paid, with their time, their money, and their emotional peace, to sit before the black mirror, willingly subjecting themselves to the digital scar. For humanity, pain wasn't just physical, spiritual, or aesthetic. It was a cognitive battle, a relentless digital struggle they embraced, believing the fleeting moments of triumph were worth the endless, self-imposed psychological torment. They chose the digital grind, not out of necessity but out of a fierce, unyielding drive to conquer, even if the enemy was often their own temper, or the meticulously designed difficulty of a program. The Xylos' primary research vessel, Perceiver 7, hung in the cold silence of space, its central analytical core humming with a desperate, almost overloaded energy. Unit 774's final aggregated report had just finished compiling, a torrent of observational data that had rendered the Xylos' understanding of sentient life utterly obsolete. The mission had been to observe human recreation, the terrifying truth. Humanity willingly, repeatedly, and enthusiastically paid for pain. From the burning agony of capsaicin-laced, spicy food, to the deliberate, muscle-tearing pressure of deep tissue massages, from the sharp, bleeding artistry of tattoos, to the precise, invasive violence of dental drills, humanity's relationship with discomfort defied every known galactic axiom. The Xylos had witnessed tens of thousands of credits exchanged for the privilege of physical torment, for the brutal reshaping of flesh, for the raw, defiant triumph over self-inflicted agony. They paid to climb electrified obstacle courses, to feel the sickening plunge of a bungee jump, to have their very nervous systems manipulated into simulated terror. They endured weeks of spiritual pilgrimages across desolate landscapes and months of post-surgical recovery for the price of a face. But the final, most unsettling data came from the digital scar, the glowing black mirror of their virtual worlds. Here, humans paid not with physical sensation, but with emotional and psychological well-being. They paid subscription fees, microtransactions, and the invaluable currency of their time to enter digital realms meticulously designed with algorithms of agony. These programs weren't meant to relax or soothe. They were engineered to frustrate, to challenge, to constantly put the human at the precipice of defeat, to deliver precisely calibrated doses of mental anguish. The Xylos had observed countless humans, hunched before their screens, faces contorted with rage, frustration, and the bitter sting of failure. They'd heard their shouts, their grunts, their whispered curses, as their digital avatars were annihilated, their meticulously crafted strategies crumbling to dust. They witnessed the emotional whiplash, the momentary surge of triumph, followed by the crushing weight of another digital setback. This wasn't accidental. It was programmed. It was the core gameplay loop. And humans kept paying. They kept playing, They kept coming back for more. The Tundered Perceiver 7 Tundra central processor ran its final synthesis. Every known species in the galaxy instinctively avoided pain, dedicating vast societal resources to its eradication. Humanity, however, had built an entire native economy around it. They commodified it, monetized it, packaged it, and then willingly purchased it in every conceivable form: physical, spiritual, aesthetic, psychological, and even digitally. Their resilience wasn't just in overcoming external threats. It was in their unparalleled, almost terrifying capacity to seek out and pay for the very experiences that would break any other sentient life form. The final report was devastatingly simple, yet profound. Conclusion: humanity is the only known species that willingly pays for pain. This behavior is not an anomaly but a fundamental, pervasive aspect of their culture, shaping their recreation, self-expression, spiritual beliefs, and even their digital interactions. Their capacity for self-inflicted suffering and their drive to conquer it in all its forms is unparalleled and presents a unique, unpredictable variable in galactic relations. For the Xylos, the understanding was complete. Humans didn't just survive overwhelming odds, they were the overwhelming odds, challenging themselves, pushing their own boundaries, and finding strange purpose in the crucible of their own agony.